So, Maddie, reveal the 2024 draft crush for people who haven't read the article yet, and everybody should. As I said, I linked it in there. It's also, if you're a member of The Athletic and you're getting all of Matt and Dave's stuff on the Niners, Maddie does an incredible job for The Athletic. Sign up now if you haven't already. Who is the 2024 Matt Barrows draft crush?
Well, let me just preface this by saying you try to match draft crush up with where they're picking, where they had their first pick. The Darnell Savage one was the exception because everybody knew that they were going to pick Bosa that year. So I went with a second round crush. But usually you pick somebody who you think can make it to 31 or to wherever the 49ers first pick is. Last year, for example, they didn't pick until the third. And I went with that Penn State tight end, and I can't even remember his name right now. Brenton something.
Strange, something like that.
Yeah. I think the Trent Baalke's ended up picking him in Jacksonville. But this year's draft crush is Adonai Mitchell, a wide receiver from Texas. And I just think that when Kyle Shanahan puts on the tape of this guy running routes, he says, okay, that's the exact type of guy that I want. So if he can make it that far, and that's a bit of an if, I think Shanahan would have a hard time not snatching him up there at pick 31.
He's a great story too. He started at Georgia. He was a heavily recruited player, and then he has a baby girl, and I think his baby girl was living in the Austin area. And so after he won a couple national championships, and he told Kirby, hey, you know what? I want to transfer to Texas so I can be near my daughter. And then, the ESPN did a whole piece on it, and, it's kind of a cool little story, but Mitchell is a really interesting player because he's a receiver. He's tall. He's athletic. He can jump. He tested well. He's a productive player. And there's a lot of talk that if the Niners don't take him at 31, maybe the Chiefs might take him on the very next pick at 32. So if they don't draft him, they may have to go against him in a Super Bowl in the future. How likely do you think it is that the Niners go wide receiver? And what do you make of all of the Aiyuk stuff? Is it just talk? I mean, you're a veteran. You've been through this. You don't get easily duped. Is the Aiyuk stuff much ado about nothing? His agents going off, his denying reports. Aiyuk himself is contacting Mike Tomlin. There's reports of interest from several clubs, including Jacksonville and Pittsburgh, most specifically. What's your read on wide receiver overall, and I guess Aiyuk?
Well, I think that they're going to take at least one wide receiver. I mean, if you look at the people who have come in and visited the 49ers, which is usually a really good indication of who they're going to take, there are a lot of wide receivers on that list. And I think it probably starts in the second round. Malachi Corley is one of them. A couple of mid-round guys, Javon Baker, he'd be a really interesting one. UCF, Central Florida. Maybe about 4 or 5 altogether. So I think that that's a position they're definitely looking at. And I think that's largely based on the fact that I'm not sure they've got anybody that they really love in the pipeline. So that, right now, and I think that the Brandon Aiyuk deal gets done, and I'll talk more about that in a second. But as it stands right now, he's not signed for next season. Juwan Jennings isn't signed for next season. And Deebo Samuel has a contract that's written in a way that would allow the 49ers to get out of it. So I think those 3 guys are going to be intact for 2024, the return to the Super Bowl push. But I think next year it's really fuzzy about who's going to be here. So that's why an Adonai Mitchell, I think, would make a lot of sense to this team. Because you would have him on a 5th-year option. So you'd have him for 5 seasons. You would have your triumvirate, your Jennings, Deebo Samuel, and Aiyuk all together this year while Mitchell is going through that rookie year phase that every 49ers wide receiver has to go through, which is learning how to play for Kyle Shanahan, the exactness that Kyle Shanahan demands for the position. And that's a big question about whether, I think that should be a big question for any wide receiver that they take. Can you kind of sort of handle the mental demands that Shanahan is putting on you? So, I mean, I think that's why it's a good idea. I think the Aiyuk stuff is exactly like the Debo Samuel stuff from 2 years ago, almost exactly, right down to unfollowing the team on social media. And if it continues to play out that way, the 49ers will get a couple of offers during the draft, and they will sort of scoff at all of them. I think they'll pick up the phone and listen, but unless it's something that blows them away, very, very hard to see them parting ways with Brandon Aiyuk.
Now, when your contract comes to an end at the Athletic, do you unfollow Kawakami and Lombardi and all the people at the Athletic? Do you kind of fall in line in that? In that?
That's the go-to move. I try to be as passive aggressive as possible.
Don't answer your cell phone. You make yourself scarce.
Yeah. I text the president of ESPN. I say, "Hey, we're both bald. How about that? Isn't that funny?" So yeah, that's the way you do it these days. You kind of make things uncomfortable for everybody and see if anything falls out of the tree.
What do you make though of Aiyuk contacting, I mean, is this do you think it's an effective thing? I mean, and I guess the question also is, what number do you think it settles on? Do you think the Niners have a number and they won't go beyond that number? And because Aiyuk clearly is trying to maximize, Ian Rappaport said, hey, he's going to wait till the end of the signing period. He's going to wait till all the other receivers sign and try to, get as much as he can. Do you think the Niners want him back at any figure, or is it just like, you know what? If it gets beyond our means, they're going to pull the plug?
Yeah. I mean, if it ever got that way, I mean, they do have leverage once we get to training camp, where Aiyuk gets fined for every day that he misses. Now, the 49ers have sort of done themselves a disservice by sort of forgiving Nick Bosa missing all of training camp last year. They don't want that with Brandon Aiyuk. Yeah, and I don't think it ever gets that far. Like I said, it feels like the Debo Samuel situation was way more uncomfortable 2 years ago than this is now, and that deal eventually got done. And I would say that Debo Samuel was coming off an even better year than Brandon Aiyuk was this last season. I mean, Debo Samuel took the league by storm. He was one of the top 3 players in the league in 2022, or in 2021, sorry. And Brandon Aiyuk had a fantastic season, but I don't know if you would say that about his season. My point is that as ugly as it looks right now, I think that at the end of the day, it all comes together. And I think if you talk to George Kittle, he would say that at this time during his contract negotiations, he was just as distressed. Didn't come to into the public light like Samuels and Aiyuk's have, but this is what happens. This is kind of the ugliness of these contract negotiations. My advice is don't follow the everyday little kind of chatter and, oh, he did this and he put a picture up on this. Wait till it's all done. If he gets traded, he gets traded. If he doesn't, he'll sign a deal and it'll likely be right around the start of training camp.